So again, on behalf of PLDT Enterprise, I want to thank you so much for joining, for coming here, taking the time.
Thank you.
And how do you like the Philippines so far? What's your first
Amazing. I just think my immediate experience was one of just warm welcoming. Yeah. The people were just so cool, and as somebody I grew up in Latin America, right. The kinship,
similar vibe?
The Latin vibe. It must be just the tropical vibe, but like, you know, because I was coming here from Tokyo before, and, and when I landed here, you know, Tokyo's already 10 hours from the U.S. This is another 4 hours.
Exactly.
This feels Latin, warm, welcoming, jovial. Also a lot of Brain Games fans. So like right up from the airport, I was just like, oh hey Jay from Brain Games. I was like, oh cool man, I'm with my people.
Exactly. And I think the Western influence of the U.S. you know here in the Philippines makes it easy for guys like you coming along. So thank you.
Thanks man.
So you had a lot of insight earlier. We appreciate what you said, and I don't want to cover too much of what you did before, but for our audience members who are watching Hot Show now, what would you say is the most impactful technology or innovation today, and how does that affect society and life?
Yeah, well, I think that what we're seeing is just across the board, the speed of disruption is what's the key thing, right? Because digital technology is already everywhere, right? But what tends to happen is people get too comfortable. They're like, okay, the world changed from 10 years to now, but somehow now it should stay the same. And that's what they don't understand, is the relentless pace means that it's constantly always changing. And so this includes digital tech, which of course is artificial intelligence and computation, but computation going beyond the screen into everything. So I think a big thing is IoT, like Internet of Things. Internet of Things just basically means that the sensors and the computation that happens on your computer or on your phone is going beyond the computer and beyond the phone and into everything. Okay. So everything's online, everything's connected, everything can give you real-time feedback. Contextual computing means that like wherever you are, you'll be served up the information that's relevant in that moment. And so that's going to change the nature of how we transact with one another. And there's a lot of obviously business opportunities and business potential for disruption in the space of like, well, what happens when we live inside the network? Like we truly just live inside the network. I mean, that's Internet of Things. But even more exciting, I think, is what's just beyond there is what's going to happen with biotech and genetics. You know,
So is that the next big thing for you, biotechnology?
Yeah, well, it's computation married to biology. Okay. So biology is an information technology, and software is eating the world in the sense that once biology is an information technology that we can harness, control, upgrade, program, means we can really start playing with the canvas of what makes us us.
It's crazy.
And particularly applications like, you know, for human health, right? Like, you know, medical care hasn't really been transformed yet.
It hasn't
the way computers
exponentially grown, like you said before.
You know, and you know, in America, there's obviously all this debate about healthcare and the costs of healthcare spiraling out of control, but that's until this biotech thing really kicks into gear.
That's true.
Because this model of like waiting until you have a symptom and getting it treated and having to have, you know, it's going to be completely disrupted. When biology becomes essentially a digital tech, we're going to see the same kind of upending of industry that we saw in traditional businesses with digital.
Are we on the right track? Do you think that the trajectory is going in the right direction?
Well, I think it's inevitable, because I think like once the genie's out of the bottle, you know, once biology is software, then all the human creativity in the world will kind of come into it and start playing with it, and we're going to see massive disruption. And I'm particularly excited about potentially seeing, you know, the end of cancer and finally ways to address, you know, degenerative diseases like Alzheimer's. I mean, it's like we can go in there and like fix the code.
It's almost there.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, given the state of the world now globally, what do you feel is the most critical issue? Like, what's plaguing us as, you know, humans, and how can technology potentially fix that?
Yeah. Well, I think a critical issue is that I spoke earlier how globally, right? If you add everything up and you look at it globally, the improvement in standard of living across the world is undeniable.
Right.
So things are getting better by every measurable indicator, but that's when you look at things globally.
Right.
Regionally, what happens is that certain disruptions and transformations across the world make it so that 100 million people in Asia get into the middle class, but then large chunks of people in America, their livelihood is affected or their jobs are affected, and so that creates national anxiety. You know, instead of thinking, well, the world is getting better, people are, well, in my country, these industries are being affected. And so what happens, people get scared, and then populist rabble-rousing gets popular, and then people tend to then elect a man who says, I'm going to return you to the glory days.
Scary.
The thing is, the glory days were never the glory days. We tend to have rose-colored images of the past, you know? People don't think about the ways in which the world has improved.
Was it really that great?
It was not, you know, and so I think that's a concern, right? You know, we saw it in Venezuela with Chavez, and we're kind of seeing a taste of that in America. But let's not become fatalistic. Again, zooming out and looking at the big picture, things are still better every day, all the time.
Overall.
But that's certainly a concern. You know, narratives matter because narratives govern action. If people think that things are getting worse, then they might be tempted to, as a last scenario, vote somebody in that they think is going to fix all their problems.
That's a very good point. Yeah. You know, a lot of people have that debate internally, like, you know, technology, it's definitely brought a lot of good things to society, but then you have people that are the naysayers that are saying, you know, technology is eventually going to be disadvantageous to society as a whole. Like, are there any negative aspects of technology that you see now, and can you cite anything that
I think
beneficial?
Well, it's not. It's like food, you know. Like food nourishes you, but food can also cause diabetes if used improperly. So I think there's a concern from the outside looking in of the overdependence on the phones, the hunched over look of people staring at their screens, not talking to each other. It doesn't look good, right? Because it's like, oh, they're not interacting. I mean, even though the person might be having, from the inside, an amazingly engrossing experience that's far more interesting than staring at the neighbor on the subway, maybe they're having an amazing time. But still, I get it. Like, the overdependence on the screen doesn't look good. I think that's going to go away when we have like augmented reality goggles, for example, you know, and like the digital information that's relevant will be like illustrated all around us in the world, but it won't be a competition between the screen and the world. I see an integration. So I think what we're seeing now with like the overdependence is just transition.
I think we have one last question.
Sure.
So if you were to talk to the major leaders of the world, these global powerful men.
Oh, if I could.
What technology do you feel they should leverage or use to make this world a better place?
Well, look, I think that the most important thing is to realize that technologies are global in scale, that the interdependency of the world, of a globalized world, is irreversible.
Okay.
And so I think the most important thing is how do we get national leaders to think globally? To have concerns of a global nature. How do we get citizens to think of themselves as earthlings? Because I think once we do that, you know, we realize that the stakes now are global, and so we need to expand. You know, they say empathy rarely extends beyond our line of sight. We only care about as far as what we can see. But, you know, you zoom out and you zoom up, and then you can see everything. You know, like when the astronauts go to space and they experience the overview effect, they see the whole Earth, and they're like, oh, it's actually one thing. You know?
Yeah, that's a good point.
I wish I could give that overview effect experience to a lot of the decision makers, because then I think they would come together and be like, oh, okay, maybe we really have to start looking of creating a national identity. Sorry, a global identity.
Global identity.
A global identity for humanity.
Cool, man. Well, I know it's been a long day. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate the insights, man.
Thanks so much, man. Thanks for sharing, man. Cheers.